Greetings and salutations, fine shits of the universe. You are on the sidelines with the sideline guys for a very special MMA edition of the show. So it's only right that I'm being joined by my brother Negrones, the man who is as low tech as it gets, right? This is Tony Ferguson kicking the fucking steel beams of his apartment high rise. My guy, Sean, how's it going, brother? Good to have you
I,
back.
it is good. It is good. I feel like we're both going through a nice little transition. You could take that as you will, but we're both moving into new places and different states. And you got an echo over there. I got an echo over here. We're still going through the early parts of the new homes as we expand this podcast, this team. We are now, state lines now. We're not an hour away anymore. We're probably a good 16, 17 hours away now.
Hey man, you and all those OTS guys in Georgia are gonna clearly plan some sort of revolution. I'm a little nervous. I don't know what's going to come of it, but I'm happy we're getting all settled in. Amateur mistake, though, right? Right off the top, you're just acknowledging all these technical issues. They weren't issues until you mentioned it. And now, look, now this is all they'll hear. But we are here with a purpose, and that purpose is UFC 313, ladies and
The
gentlemen.
313.
How dare you? I mean, it's only right. They messed up the location, right? But it's okay. We'll
They should
allow
have done
it.
it in Detroit, man.
Yep. But we will allow it.
Shout out
Amen.
Eminem.
Yeah, Fleminem. I mean, of course, the most appropriate rapper to earn your support. But with that,
That's
Sean, why
right.
don't you let the people know where they can find you and all of your exciting tweets about Eminem?
Ah, man. Eminem's the GOAT, all time greatest rapper. But you can find me at bsreports.org. If you want to get started in the sports industry, in writing, whatever Chris doesn't want to do, uh, shoot me a shout and I will help you get started.
You heard the man. Go ahead and interact, engage with BS Reports. He put his photo up, right? It's about time. It's the real account now. It feels good to see you flourishing on Twitter. Let's keep it going. Let's live tweet these events from now on. How about that? That's my homework for
I could
you.
do that. I
Yeah,
could do
let's
that.
do it.
I actually, that's good thinking right there.
Now, right off the top, it's only right that I let you guys all know where you can find me as well. God damn it. You can find me on Twitter as well as TikTok at Negron MMA. You could also catch me on Instagram at Chris Negron _. Now, last week, for the second week in a row, our main event ended with some sort of strange situation going on with these eye pokes. God damn it! So, Sean, I thought this was a very interesting conversation, right? A very interesting conversation to have with you in particular because of the things you are getting into over there in Atlanta. I won't. I'll let you delve into that as deep as you're willing to, but my question for you is, in a world where we were talking about the technological advancements of replay and the interfaces in combat sports, I personally feel that the Nevada State Athletic Commission in the UFC Hellscape, the world renowned UFC Hellscape, they botched it for many reasons. But the first being, I don't blame, why am I blanking on his name? That's my guy. I love him. The guy with the long beard. But anyway, I don't blame him for missing the actual eye poke, the first one, right? Because there were two. So the first eye poke, I don't blame him for missing it. Asu immediately let him know, right? Call this timeout, which would be interesting to talk about as far as whether or not that should be implemented. Because goddamn it, whenever these guys ask for one, it seems like they get them, right? But he called his own timeout. The ref allowed it, and then they went to the replay. And now here's the second time that Las Vegas botched it. Right? They go up, they throw up the replay of the supposed eye poke, and they shut it down immediately. They're like, no, 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 that was a legal punch. Turns out they show it on the broadcast later. It was clearly an illegal eye poke, but for whatever reason, I guess the pressure, right? The pressure of the large crowd at the UFC Apex bearing over all of the officials, made them, hey, we got to rush this. We got to rush this. And they started the fight again. And right after that, we got our second eye poke, which at this point, you got to have your eyes open for this kind of foul. You see what I did there? You see what but anyway, the second foul, which leads to the ultimately the finishing sequence for Manel Kape, was also very clearly missed. And this time, Asu tried it again. He tried to call his timeout one more time. God damn it! But you know what they said? They said, "Hell no! We already gave you one that you didn't deserve, that you didn't earn." And then after all that, I mean, it almost seems like you can't get it more wrong, Sean. So my question for you is, if we were writing the rules, right, how would you change the rules in the way they work? Because I think that's an important distinction in the world of MMA. What would you do to prevent debacles like this moving forward?
That's a good question because obviously you know the type of field I'm in when it comes to other sports. So we actually handle something like this pretty specifically. So we actually have talked about what it would take in the MMA world and what, how hard it is to navigate when it comes to replay or any sort of splicing of frames to see a sort of technical illegal foul, if you want to call it that. So if I had to make the rules, I, for starters, would kind of keep it the same. The only thing I would do is just like in the NFL, just like in MLB, you know, they don't show the video to the fans there until after the call or after things have already kind of been made. Everything's very private. You can see it on TV because it's TV and there's no influence and it's just all like, all right, let's see what it is. But when you're at the live event, it's very rare that you end up seeing it while they're still reviewing it themselves. Or if you do, sometimes in basketball you get that. But it's still, they'll have the headset on so that they can drown the noise and talk to whoever they need to talk to. And it's not there's no decision by them to make. It should be coming from someone in a truck or someone in a place in a neutral site somewhere far away. Like MLB does it in New York City. I think NFL still does New York City. I know NHL does Toronto. No matter what, there's a neutral site where people like us in a way decide what the call will be, and I think that's where it has to be. If you're stopping play, if you're stopping the action, it should be something where now someone can watch that footage, those 10 seconds, in a 3-minute time lapse and find out because you still get that 5-minute timeout, right? So within that 5 minutes, you'll find out. And if you come to the conclusion that in those 5 minutes or in that time that shit was legal and we should have never even stopped it, 1 point deduction automatically. So if you are waving your hand, causing time or asking for time because you think it was illegal, be weary because if you fuck up, that's a point on you. Even if you win the round, whatever the case may be, you lose or you get that 9 for that round. So I think that's how it should be. It's kind of like the NFL. If you challenge it and you're wrong, you lose the challenge and that timeout. That's on you now. So I think MMA should look into that where if you're calling your own timeouts because you feel shit's illegal, then that's on you. It's like you're challenging the call in a way. If you're right, you get that 5 minutes still, and then you come back when you're ready. But if they use that time for you to get your rest and they find out it's legal, you lose that point. So I think that's the way they should move it. I know it's not a team sport like all the other sports I mentioned, but in a way, you are your own team, and the people behind you are a team as well. So, you know, there have definitely been, we've watched MMA for a long time where we've seen coaches and stuff even use that sort of tactic in it. Hey, you're not feeling it, you take a knee. I think we just kind of saw it in a way in that last boxing fight, right? Where he just takes the knee. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. I just watched
Tank
it.
Davis and Lamont
Yeah, Tank
Roach.
Davis. Thank you. Yes, where you just take the knee, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, what's going on here? So I think in that way, that's the way MMA should look into it. But I think there's still in such a premature phase of replay and stopping it and ref calling it. It's just like not to end my point. In the NFL, sometimes where the NFL we see it now with replay assist. That's the ref making that call. There's no teams persuading it. So just like that, if a ref sees that eye poke and they say stop, there's no challenge from whoever and whoever. It's the ref's call. So I think it should be more about the fighter calling it. Hey, listen, hey, you poked my eye. Okay, time. Let's check it out. And then I think that's the way it should go.
I love this idea of a challenge format. I think this can only work in a world though where fouls are actually punished, right? Because why would any MMA fighter in today's landscape be in a position where they actually would want to challenge a foul? Like I feel like the majority of the time, what is the difference? Like you're gonna in the situation that played out this week, right? He called his own timeout, and then the fucking officials botched the replay. They looked at the replay incorrectly and then gave him like so in that scenario, he would have got his challenge docked when in reality it was
Yes.
on the fucking ref for missing that scenario twice. So
Yes, but how many times have we even seen that in the NFL and baseball, whatever, where it goes to replay and it's clear as day, and sometimes they still get it wrong. Shit happens, It's just how it works sometimes. And then like I think I didn't even get to mention the other part where if it is a foul, then I think UFC has to make a decision on what a foul means. If it is, guy challenges a turn, it is a foul, blah blah blah. The person who does do the, enact the foul, what happens with them? So that's a question I guess you can answer there because for me, I'm more strict. Where if you foul, it should be a point. But I know that some shit happens.
yep.
So it's shit happens by accident, and sometimes they wait for the second foul, which I'm okay with at times. But you're the more MMA guru here, so I that one I leave to you on
Tidy,
what would happen
tidy.
for that.
I got you though. I got you. Let's figure this out together. So I love the ideas you're implementing, right? I'm only looking to build, right? I'm not looking to subtract. So first of all, aesthetically, right? Let's get one of those yellow sirens, right? The tow truck siren, right? Let's get one of those so that we throw it up, right? Especially imagine the scenes, right? In the cavernous apex with that light blaring as we're looking over this just amazing theater, right? First of all. Now, beyond that, I think the rules should be enforced 100%. I agree with you. Like from the back, that's your warning. If anything happens, it happens. But I think your challenge should be used to navigate those scenarios. Let's say you got kicked in the nuts and you're like, man, you didn't see that. And then they stop the fight or the ref decides, hey, you know what? You did kick him in the nuts. I'm gonna take a point from you for kicking in the nuts. And the guy said, hold on. I landed clearly to the body. Check the replay. Now we got a whole replay review. Now, I think this is an interesting tactic because it does create scenarios where someone who is potentially gassed or gassing could buy themselves some time, right? But at the end of the day, both athletes are dealing with that scenario. Obviously, I think the MMA structure is trying to take away from these breaks in action. I think that's the main goal of why they do dumb shit like this. It's like, all right, yeah, it doesn't matter if we got it wrong because the fight's still going. But that clearly takes away the onus of both fighters. Like in the current structure, there's no reason to not foul. You get one of each, right? So you might as well exhaust your options before you go out there and deplete your gas tank. So let's immediately force penalties on these fouls and then make the challenge count because in this way, now you have to hold it, right? You're not going to necessarily call a challenge on something that doesn't get called for the scenario. Maybe you get called for a foul later in the fight, right? And you need it then. I think if you get it right, though, you shouldn't be penalized, right? You should have that option to throw out there again. But then it almost makes it almost makes it a more tactical battle within the fight, right? It kind of takes the athletes out of the fight. So I would say this should also be more on the coaches, right? To be able to enact these things, whether it be like, I don't know how that will work, even though, right? Like to try to throw in some kind of challenge flag or something. I don't know how that will work, but I think a world in which we have more penalties for illegal techniques because they're not being enforced in any way, and people are literally getting knocked out because of it. I don't think Asu Almabayev was in a position to come back in this fight, but you can't deny the reality of those eye pokes and the fact that he was in the middle of a takedown when the fight actually did get stopped. So it's just a mess all around. And I think the only way to get out of this hole, we could play with some other stuff. We could play with the replay. We could play with the challenges. But if you're not enforcing these fouls, none of that shit matters.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm more on the strict side where I think you got to be able to, if you're challenging and you get it right, that you did get hit in an illegal place, that's a point on that person for doing that. Or, the referee decides in that replay, did that shit look intentional? Was there a little bit of room for error? Or was that shit clearly off both nutsacks? Or if both nuts hit the nutsack clear and we now need to take a point? Or did it graze the leg and all right, wait, warning? I think that's where the referee still, like today, has his decision to make, and he still makes that decision. All right, time. All right, take your break. Let's look at it. I still think it's in the referee's hands, but I do think, enforcing more of a replay and having it just like in MLB, when you got a called safe at fucking first base, Angel Hernandez, who's now retired, is out there not seeing anything. You get 15 seconds. You get 15 seconds from the second you challenge to someone for them to make the decision whether you're going to challenge or not. And I think for UFC, you can have it 5 seconds. You have 5 seconds to tell me. Second you tell me, we got 30 seconds to come up with a decision. Just like in the NFL. NFL, they try to cut that shit down because just like in the MLB, they want to keep the time on TV as small as possible. So in that sort of scenario, it should be you have 1 minute to figure it out. 1 minute. All right, we know what it is. We saw the replay 6 times in super slow-mo. It's illegal. This is what happens. This is what we're going to do.
And
it's also good
it
too.
sounds a little convoluted, but I think in practice, it'll actually give the refs
Yes.
more leeway to call fouls because they're going to be in a position where now, if I call a foul and I wasn't exactly sure, I could really determine how to move forward with it, even if that takes 15, 20 seconds each time. I think that's important because these fouls are clearly affecting the outcomes of these fights.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole reason you have a truck, right? Like every league has that truck to have that one guy, those two, 3 guys who are sitting there reviewing tape. The second they think something's iffy, they're waiting for it in case they challenge, or in case there's a thing that they have to stop play. So I think if you're having the truck, obviously to use more of it in a TV network sort of aspect, but to have that truck also as a guy who could sit there and the second there's a foul, he's ready to go. Okay, actually, I looked at it just now. It is a foul. Like you see it when we're watching the tape. When we're watching the fights, all of a sudden they'll show in a little, PIP in the corner. You're like, yeah, there it is. There's the foul, and you'll see, or a really nice shot where it's a spinning back fist in super slow mo, and they'll show it in the little corner of the screen. And I think that's what you do. You can have that guy who's doing that just now tell the ref in his ear. You got refs with cameras on their forehead. You can put a fucking earpiece on like they already do and tell them, hey, listen, that's a foul. Hey, listen, okay, they're challenging. Yes, it is a foul. Put the clock. And that's the other thing, too, I was going to mention. A lot of times when we call fouls, we let that shit like go like an extra 4 or 5 seconds before the foul's called or before we even stop it. It'd be good to now get that time back. I feel like the UFC is not great with that. Like, especially with the NFL. NFL is so precise. NBA is so precise. When there's a challenge, when there's anything, it's like put the clock back to 3:18. Sometimes the UFC calls a foul and they'll let the clock run like another 7, 8 seconds before they stop it. And then you're like, why is there 3:09 left on the clock? The foul was at 3:10, fucking 19. How many knockouts have we seen where the guy's dead, the referee throws him off, 8 seconds into the fight, but somehow it's a 24-second fight. You're like, wait, what? Wait a second. The guy was dead 5 seconds in. How does that dude not have the record? So I think it would be good for that situation as well.
Yep, we could actually get some accurate reflections of how these fights play out. God damn it, we got some good ideas. Call us up, Hunter Campbell, right? Because I know Dana White not really running shit no more. Hunter, hit my line. I got you, brother. But with all that being said, let's do a quick recap of last week. UFC Hellscape 24,023. I'm crawling out, baby. We dug ourselves a hole early, but I just won 2 events in a row. I went 7-3 in the head-to-head pick'ems, bringing my record to 50 wins, 33 losses, 1 draw for a win percentage of 60.12. While Sean went 6-4, took an L, but still winning at life. His total record is 53 wins, 30 losses, and 1 draw for a win percentage of 63.69, 69 with the 9 on the regular. But with that being said, our dynasty was an interesting week. I went 2-1, almost went 3-0, but goddamn, Danny, goddamn. Speaking of that fight, also, I thought, even though I picked Nasrat, I thought Esteban won and kind of got robbed. So there was some
He definitely got robbed.
scorecards throughout the entirety of the night
He
as
got
well,
robbed.
which I think is important to mention. But I went 2-1, bringing my record to 21 wins, 19 losses, and 1 draw for a win percentage of 52.44. While Sean went 4-4, right? The ultimate 500 for 33 wins and 22 losses, a 60% win percentage. And now our dynasty totals, right? It's only right that we end the discussion here. After last week, I bumped up 0.3 percentage in my win percentage to 61.14. The total of 216 wins, 136 losses, 3 draws, and 4 no contests. You hear that? Unlucky as hell. While Sean is sitting on 228 wins, 142 losses, 1 draw, and 3 no contests for a win percentage of 61.5. So you are currently winning by 0.4 percentage in the dynasty totals. Let's keep rocking with UFC 313 because it's a jam-packed dynasty week, goddammit. So our first fight of the night, the Djorden Santos minus 186 going up against Ozzy Diaz plus 165. We're starting the night in the division of kings, the middleweight division. Sean, you get to lead the dance, and it's not women's MMA this time, so I fuck with you. Go ahead, brother.
I mean, I feel like we can kind of call this one like a double debut, right? I feel like when Diaz's last fight got obliterated when he fought Zhang Mingyang, I think we didn't really learn anything about him in that fight. I think that when that shit happens, I think it's either going to deter you off the path or it's going to motivate you to try to come back and have a way better fight. So in this situation, I don't think he's afraid or timid. Like I felt like he was in that case. I think he had a lot of butterflies, or he just was way off when it came to that fight. I don't know. I just felt like everything that was not him. So I don't know what really happened. So in this situation, I think it's about just trying to find the flip side of success here. All three of uh, Diaz's losses are all from heavy, heavy hits. From heavy hitters, and I think just eventually when you get hit in the chin, it deteriorates you even more. And I think now that you're facing UFC competition, it gets a little bit harder. So joining the UFC late, I think what is he 34, right? If that's where I think he is, I think for Diaz to win this fight, I think he needs to stick to his guns and just go guns blazing right to Santos, go all out. And I think he still has tremendous power. And if he just continues to push through, I feel like uh, he's just a big 185er who will do great here. But I think outside of that, I can see him struggling trying to out finesse Santos. Although perhaps I'm speaking a little too far in advance because I don't know. But for me, I think this is all about just pushing through. And I think for me, I have Santos winning because I think this one is just going to continue to push through way too much and it leads to a possible submission. And while I don't think it'll be a knockout, I just think it's going to be a very lazy and sloppy fight that just won't won't be good for him. And it'd be kind of one of those situations where you really wonder what Diaz could have been if this was 5 years earlier.
Yep. This is a weird one because the way you led it, right? I thought you felt differently about it, but I agree with you and your ultimate pick. I think the Jordan Santos of the two really has a process out there, right? He's going and putting pressure on you, and he's trying to land that rear hand. And ultimately, hey, it might not look the prettiest, but he gets it done, right? And I think this is one of many Southpaw versus Orthodox matchups on the night. And I think Ozzy Diaz has shown in all of the UFC level competition fights that he has been in, right? Losing against Joe Pyfer, losing against Ming Yang Zhang. He's shown really susceptible to those left-sided shots. And guess what? That's exactly what the Djorden is going to be looking for here. So I honestly, while I agree, I think this could go to decision or could be a submission. I tend to feel like the knockout is more live, but ultimately I do see the Djorden Santos winning by decision. But I think the odds should be wider on this one. Like I was actually pretty surprised where they sat just based on obviously it's not easy to come off of those losses looking good if you're Ozzy Diaz, but at the end of the day, it's just so many things stacked up against you, right? You got the age, you got the momentum, all these other factors, and then what looks like to be big shot susceptibility, right? So you got the trifecta of things going against you. I'm going with the Djorden Santos as well. Next up, we move on to the bantamweight division, the first matchup of many, which has dynasty implications. We've got my dynasty fighter, Chris Gutierrez, minus 110, going up against John Castaneda, plus 100. Coming, making the quick turnaround, right? You get the honor of getting to break down fights 2 weeks in a row. John Castaneda, after Douglas Silva de Andrade couldn't make weight, couldn't fight. We scrambled this one together after Chris Gutierrez lost his last opponent as well. I love that the UFC is doing this, and I also love that they're letting these guys fight at 145 pounds instead of bantamweight, right? Let these guys fight at a more natural weight. And let's really just treat it like a bantamweight fight in our heads, ladies and gentlemen. This is a tough fight for John Castaneda, especially because of what his last fight looked like against Daniel Marcos. I think this is a very similar um, similar style of fight to his last fight, and we saw him get bested against Daniel Marcos with a lot of those rangy outsider shots. Obviously, John Castaneda landed a head kick in the last seconds of that fight, which made you feel like if we had a couple seconds more, he might have been able to knock out Daniel Marcos. I think that's how this fight is going to look too, though, man. I think Chris Gutierrez is a smooth operator on the outside, and he's going to be able to land a lot of clean leg kicks on top of straight hands from either stance. I love the way he switches stance as well. His straight shots from either stance are sharp, and he really puts you in a position where you have to try to cut him off, right? And good luck doing that. Even the guys that beat him, right? Guys like Song Yadong, they really took advantage of singular moments in that, but it's not like for an entirety of a fight he's ever getting outmaneuvered. That's the game of chess here, and I think in that last fight, John Castaneda showed a little bit too much hesitancy for my liking. I'm going to go with Chris Gutierrez at minus 110, but I'm not going to lie. Um, this one also troubles me a little bit, not because of the odds. I actually think the odds should be a little bit more wider in Gutierrez's favor. I just feel like with the short notice nature of this fight, John Castaneda might be able to hit a little bit of that nitrous button, right, in a way that he wasn't able to against Daniel Marcos and bring something out that we haven't really seen from him to this stage. But that's what's gonna take for him to get a win here, in my opinion. I think Chris Gutierrez fights in a disciplined way that we just saw him get dispatched by. So give me Gutierrez.
I think this fight is honestly closer because of Gutierrez's defense more than his offense. I think Gutierrez has kind of like a loose guard, which makes him pretty vulnerable to solid straights or even leg kicks. And I think that's what Castaneda does really well is using his combinations to get right to the leg kicks and really trying to disrupt patterns. And I think someone like Gutierrez who relies heavily on his head movement and his defense to try to and his footwork to try to move. I think someone that like Castaneda who can just constantly break down the lower parts in your legs, is going to make it really hard for Gutierrez to really get going. And I think obviously this is going to be a fun one because, obviously it's with them going up in weight just for this sort of situation. I think you're going to see a little bit more power from both of these guys. But for me, I think this is one where I'm going with Gutierrez because what I saw in his last fight, landing at a 75% clip in your punching is not easy to do. So it's just one of those things where I feel that Castaneda is great, and I think he can still disrupt the patterns, but I still feel that Gutierrez has really good precision with his hands, and I think of his ability and because of his experience to adapt to the leg kicks and still try to force his way towards the edge will eventually give him enough to win each and every round. I think this fight will be close, but I still think it would be one of those 30-27s where it wasn't so clear that Gutierrez won, but it was just clear that he won each round, if that makes any sense, to the point where it was a good fight, but Gutierrez kept doing just a little bit more. And so it'll be fun, but I think Gutierrez takes it.
Yep, this is definitely going to be one of those bull versus matador matchups. And if John Castaneda could pin him up against the fence, probably have more success. But yeah, I think Gutierrez is too smooth on the outside. Give me that dub. Next up, we move on to the featherweight division. We're staying in the featherweight division. Mairon Santos, minus 300, going up against Sean's dynasty fighter, Francis Marshall, at plus 250. How you feeling about this matchup?
Not good when it comes to the dynasty. I'm picking Santos to win here, and I pick him because I loved his win over Ofli in his last fight. Man, his kickboxing and takedown defense were probably one of the best I've seen in, I would say, the last 18 something months. Like it felt super controlled when it came to Santos's last fight, and I think what he's just expected to repeat that against someone like Marshall. And I'm not saying Francis Marshall is any pushover because he's not. That's the reason why I have him. I just think he isn't easily likely to crumble. Santos speaking from Francis Marshall. I think Marshall brings a good, BJJ sort of background to this fight and probably will test Santos again with the takedown defense. But I think with Santos' strong performance in his last fight, I think he can use that and use the same sort of, practice and training that he had in the Ofli fight to kind of bring into this one. I think these are very similar styles. I think you could just try to, don't overreact to the feints. I think same thing for Marshall. I think something like Santos does a lot is really try to draw, and I think that's going to put Marshall into some sort of explosive range that I think he might be getting into some trouble in. So I think that's eventually going to happen where Marshall tries to push forward a little bit, thinking he's gonna push Santos back, and I think he's gonna go right into Santos's range. I have this as a second round knockout for Santos, but I think this is one where Marshall will make the mistake and then Santos will capitalize.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. I like Francis Marshall's game. I think the fireman goes out there and really has thunder in his punches. Like everything he does is super explosive and a little telegraph because of that. But man, like if that shit lands, you're going to be in a rough spot. I loved his last fight against Dennis Bazookia, even though it ended in a strange way. I think it was a real test of his mettle and puts you in a good spot to bounce back from in a matchup like this where you're the veteran, right? I think it's going to be up to Francis Marshall to early on in this fight try to counter those leg kicks of Mairon Santos and put him in a position where he's guessing those options. His only real case, though, and I agree with you on this sense, is he's a lot more tight when he throws his shots. And Mairon Santos, with his ability to be loose and be on the outside, I think it's gonna be easy for him to diffuse the bomb that is Francis Marshall. I think ultimately, though, same time counters is the game. If you're Francis Marshall here, I think you're trying to find lightning in a bottle, trying to match that thunder to the lightning, god damn it, and find that perfect moment to land a shot. And I think it lies somewhere within those leg kick attempts, right? Forcing and baiting that situation out in a favorable spot to try to catch Mairon. But I think this once again speaks to the respect we have for Mairon's game in his second fight, where we're selling the idea of him winning. You got to land a perfect shot, goddammit. I think Mairon Santos is smooth and has a chance to be one of the best products we've seen off of the Ultimate Fighter, especially in recent years. So I like Mairon Santos in this one too. We can move on there. Next up, we move on to the welterweight division. We've got Alex Morono plus 550 going up against Carlos Leal. How about this, Sean? This is the last fight with no dynasty action for the entirety of the night. So that speaks to the kind of night we got ahead of us at UFC 313. It's only right that I start off this fight by discussing how bad I feel for Alex Morono in this spot. All right, look, Carlos Leal got hosed in his last fight against Rinat Fakhradinov, right? He should have won that fight. So the UFC is like, hey, you know what? I got you, right? They tried to do this with Donald Cerrone back in the day too, but it just didn't work. He was able to play the spoiler. Funny enough, I think the odds are a little bit off on this one. I think although Carlos Leal is clearly the more physically potent fighter of the two, I think a little bit more live considering how crafty Morono is, but I'm ultimately picking Carlos Leal. I think the pressure and the constant threat of those thudding shots is going to be what makes the difference here. I think Carlos Leal ends up finding the finish and takes the judges out of it. So give me Carlos Leal, second round knockout.
Yeah, this is one of those where I have it in my notes here. This is the Leal tuna can fight. This is the one where they try to get you back. They give you that vet that's been around that you want. You forgot that he's still here, and it's not even that I don't like Morono, even though I'm a huge Donald Cerrone fan. Please stay retired. It was just that fact. I remember when he got that short notice fight with Morono, and I really thought this would have been like Donald's last, taste of victory because we all knew Donald was at the end, and he just got walloped in like 5 days' notice. Morono came in there and just killed him. So it was that was my turning point for me on Donald's career. I was like, all right, enough, no more. But I think this is one where, like I said, I think this is where Leal will just come in. Morono is slower now. He's very slow paced, poor footwork. He has the tendency now, especially in his fights lately, to just take on more and more damage. And I don't know how he stands after all the damage he takes sometimes, but I think Morono's really good at the grappling. That definitely has not factored out of his, the reason why he's not in the UFC. So I think he's still at a top tier level when it comes to the grappling, keeping the fight very close range. I just don't think he's going to be able to control someone like Leal. I think Leal is eventually just going to be obviously very impressive, but use his striking advantage and his footwork to keep him at bay, keep him at the distance he needs him to be. And I think this is one where Leal just pieces him up little by little by little to the point where you just can't see Morono keep going forward. And I think the superior striking and forcing the takedown defense is going to have this fight stopped by late round 3. But I could see this one going to decision because Morono is a tank.
4 fights down, 4 fights in agreement. We move on to a fight that I love that you're leading the dance for, Sean. And the reason for that is this is a very close to your heart dynasty matchup, right? We got your dynasty fighter, Brunno Ferreira, plus 120, the Hulk, going up against your former dynasty fighter, Armen Petrosyan, who is the favorite at minus 135, who you dropped this last season, right? So it almost feels like he's trying to spite you in this matchup and go out there and get a dub. So why don't you give us the breakdown of this middleweight fight?
Don't worry, he won't. He get knocked out first round. That's what I have. So I think Arman's going down. But this isn't just like the hate train because of what Arman has done for my dynasty. I just think this is one where Brunno has just shown he's got devastating first round power. And I think someone like Arman, who has put himself in dangerous situations over and over and over again, he has not gotten better with time. I feel like from when I drafted him, I think there was still some upside to Petrosyan's game. And I feel like he has not fallen off a cliff, but fallen off of a very steep hill as to the production and the caliber of what we expected from Petrosyan just 2 years ago, or maybe 2.5. But I think for me, that's why I released him in Dynasty. I just didn't see a way where he could build himself a 3-fight win streak again. And to me, I felt um, while I'm a big fan of Petrosyan, and even though yes, he just did come off of a knockout loss, he's still a very skilled kickboxer, very clean technical striking. He's got great movement. He's going to be able to avoid Ferreira's heavy punches early. But I do think, like I said, Petrosyan leaves his chin very exposed. And he's not as fast as he once was to avoid the vulnerable, powerful shots that have come his way before. And I just don't think he's susceptible to avoiding that knockout power punch anymore. He's gotten hit with some heavy shots, and you've seen him just kind of take them early in his career. Now, I think it rattles, obviously, because it's like I said, you can't get punched in the face forever. I just think it's one of those where Ferreira's not going to miss every shot, and I think it's just one of those where while Petrosyan is very clean and will kind of piece him up, I do think Brunno is just so much more powerful that Petrosyan's footwork just won't be enough to avoid Brunno Ferreira for 15 minutes. But my one fear about this fight is Ferreira's gas tank when it comes to the second round. I wonder how strong and how refreshed will he feel if he can't go in and absolutely, take Armen's head off in the first 5 minutes. Can he bounce back to still win the final 10 minutes? Or will he open that door for Armen to eventually piece him apart and take it by decision? So if Armen wins the first round, he's winning the whole fight. But that's just one of those where I just don't see happening. But it's up to Ferreira to either find it or make this fight 15 minutes, because if he's got to do either or. If he doesn't, he's losing.
Yep, that's a great shout. This is a weird fight, man. This is one that I went back and forth on for a while. I think Brunno Ferreira's last fight against Abus Magomedov, right? Someone who is very near and dear to your heart as well. That fight was shocking to me just because of how quick he
I tried
fell
to
off a
avoid that.
cliff.
I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it's okay. How quick he fell off a cliff against someone who is known to fall off of cliffs, right? I think I was almost watching that fight like, hey, you got a boost right where you want him, right? And then Brunno was the one that ended up falling off in that matchup. I think this fight is tough though because Armen got knocked out in his last fight too, but you could argue before that double back fist, right? He was giving Chara a lot of trouble with his movement and mobility. I think ultimately, as far as what we learned in the most recent fights, I'm giving the edge to Armen Petrosyan here. I think he has the defensive responsibility that Abus showed. And of course, Abus had to weather some storms too. But I think ultimately he is a little bit more defensively responsible than Abus because Abus is out there trying to take your fucking head off. But that in this matchup could also bring trouble too, right? Like you said, Brunno's a marauder. He's coming forward. And sometimes you got to meet that force head on, right? In order to prevent yourself from getting just overwhelmed by it. But I think ultimately Armen has the footwork to keep this neutral, right? Stay out on the outside and prove how bad this division is. So give me Armen Petrosyan, minus 135, our first head-to-head. Next up, we move down to the flyweight division. We've got the number 15 ranked Joshua Van representing my Dynasty squad, minus 170, going up against Rei Tsuruya, plus 154. From Sean's Dynasty squad, we got our first Dynasty head-to-head matchup, and I love that I'm going first here because I get to set the tones for Pick'em, right? I'm going to start this analysis by saying this is also a short notice fight, right? Which I think plays into the reality of this. Shout out to Rei Tsuruya for taking this fight on short notice. But a big step up on short notice for Joshua Van too, right? Compared to the kind of matchup he had before. It was a striker. Now you got a very dangerous grappler. So I love this matchup. I love this fight. I think it's going to teach us a lot about both of these guys. But I got to say, man, Rei Tsuruya on the tape, Don't get me wrong, he's not fighting the best guys out there, but man, he's one of the most creative grapplers in the UFC right now. I think his ability to chain things off of opportune moments, right? Like I remember this one sequence where he inverted for a knee bar after failing on a takedown. It's like, God damn, like if you got to deal with all these different layers of threats, you can find yourself in danger real quick, right? And I could see a scenario where Rei Tsuruya goes out here and submits Joshua Van early. I think he is that potent where his strengths lie. But I don't know, man. There's something about Josh Van that gives me Max Holloway vibes, right? He's always in these fights. He has that young veteran game plan, and he's been working on his defensive responsibilities, which I think brings a lot of problems for these guys, man. Shout out to Rei Tsuruya's ribs, right? Your ribs are going to be hurting in this matchup no matter what, because Josh Van rips to the body. And I think that's going to slow the takedown attempts, especially the later on we get in this fight. But don't get me wrong, man. If we see early takedowns for Rei Tsuruya, it might just be wraps. Like we might not even get a chance to see Joshua Van's game plan play out. But I'm going to pick Joshua Van here in the same vein we both failed and picked Charles Johnson last week. I think ultimately it takes him a while to get that engine started, but once he does, he should be able to drown Rei Tsuruya and keep him where he is more skilled, and that's on the feet. So give me Josh Van by a very closely contested decision.
I saw this fight, and I'm going to ask you before I give my analysis. Do you think these two will fight again?
That's a great question. UFC sign some more flyweights. God damn it! I hope they don't. But yeah, I could see it happening down the line for a title even.
That's exactly what I have. I have these two fighting either in a number one contender fight or even a title fight if one of them ends up winning a championship down the line. I think this is just like a preview of what's to come. Especially, I wish this fight was on full camps for both. I really do. This is a great fight and I think no one's talking about it. I think for something that's just shout out to Ray for taking this fight, and he's got to definitely, as much as he might be the better fighter right now on a full camp, it's not easy fighting like someone like Van, who absolutely gives you Max Holloway vibes. This dude, this I wish I had Van on my dynasty, man. Like he was the guy I wanted. 100% props to you. Like this is a guy I wanted from the very beginning, and he just is out there for blood. He's like, even if you feel he's out of the fight, he still finds a way to keep it going. And for someone like Ray, who's just such a tremendous wrestler, grappler, and just takes his fight to the ground and just controls, I do feel a way that Van can keep Ray at bay in realizing right, and what he's going to bring to this fight in a lot of grapple pressure and just try to piece him apart, little by little. And it sucks because if Ray ends up taking him down, I don't like Van's takedown defense yet. I don't think it's great. I think his footwork and his striking is what gets him to these fights to stay standing, and then you're fighting Van's fight. But it really comes down to, I think, the first 2 to 2.5 minutes of this fight on who's controlling this fight. If Van can constantly push the pressure but keep it at bay to use his takedown defense and keep Ray away, then you're looking at Van controlling this fight for 15 minutes. But if Ray can get the takedown within the first 2.5 minutes, you might be looking at a very, very tough situation for Van to try to neutralize someone like Ray's wrestling game for 15 whole minutes. So I have it as Van winning by unanimous decision, but this is one of two of the closest fights I had, because I don't know. I haven't seen Ray in short notice from what I remember. So I have no idea how, in shape he really is in this moment, where he's coming from, how he feels, and how well prepared he is for someone like Van, in what is it, a week's notice, 2 weeks notice to, 8 weeks notice. So I think that's one where I can't pick Ray to win yet, but I very, very much look forward to them fighting again, because I think they will fight again with the trajectory of both of these guys' careers, and that will be either a fight night main event or a co-main or even a main event somewhere, because they don't give flyweights main events on pay-per-views. But, I think eventually you will see these two guys again, and people will be confused as to, oh, wait, they're fighting a second time? What was the first time? This was the first time, and I think we have a really, really, really great fight on our hands.
Yes, sir. I just gotta say, this should have been the feature prelim, right? Imagine watching this banger of a fight and then running it forward to the heavyweight division, right? How dare ya? We should have done this the opposite way, goddamn it, because they would have looked even faster out there. But our featured prelim, we've got the number 5 ranked Curtis Razor Blaydes -310 going up against the Rizvan himself, Rizvan Kuniev +270, making his UFC debut. Sean, this one also has dynasty implications because I am the dynasty owner of Curtis Blaydes. So why don't you lead the dance and be the first to tip your hand about who you think is going to win this matchup?
This is a good fight. I think I have Curtis Blaydes winning because I'm still a believer in Blaydes. I feel like Blaydes has only lost to, I guess you could say, the top tier of heavyweight talent. And I mean top tier talent at that point of time. Francis Ngannou. The only one where you could say maybe not was what the hell is his name? Freaking the Black Beast. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. But
Derek
the
Lewis,
freaking
goddamn
Derek
it.
Lewis. I can't believe I'm blanking on that. But that was like a crazy little uppercut that just got Blaydes sleeping. Never saw it coming. But besides that, losing to Sergey, Francis, Aspinall, he's faced only these heavy, heavy hitters, and it's eventually put him in harm's way. But it's just one of the all four of those guys are the heaviest punchers probably right now still active. So it's just one of those where I think Blaydes is going to go in trying to wrestle, make this fight a humongous wrestle bout, and I think you know for someone like Kuniev, I guess you can pronounce it that way, is just going to try to capitalize on the striking and just try to force body shots and uppercuts towards Blaydes, because I feel like when Blaydes tries to level change, he leaves himself very vulnerable. But I think this is one where it's kind of a little bit of an overhype right now. I think Kuniev is great. I'm not taking that away from him. But forcing him right into a Curtis Blaydes matchup, I think there are serious, serious levels to the UFC. Um, I feel like we've seen that a lot where guys come over from elsewhere and they're this big hype thing, and you find out that they're kind of right there with them, with the rest of the pack of all these contenders, with Chandler, with MVP, with Raya Sakura. Like, I feel like we see these big names come in from other promotions and kind of not get exposed, but just like push the brakes a little bit. And while I know, Kuniev did great in the Contender Series, and I'm not taking that away from him, I just think there's a little bit too much of a jump. I honestly wish Rosenstrike was still in the UFC, because this would have been a great fight I would have loved to see, to really get himself acclimated to a top 10 ranking heavyweight, then fighting someone like a Blaydes and seeing where you go from there. I think Blaydes is too much of a jump, and I think this one's honestly going to end in knockout fashion. So give me Blaydes. I was going to say by sub, but I think Blaydes is coming in with more to prove than I think anyone on this card, because I think people overlook him because every time he gets close, he ends up fighting that big, heavy-handed striker, and it ends up going wrong for him. So I think with a win like this, can get him right back into a top 4, top 3, and then we'll see where what he can face and where he goes from there.
Yeah, this fight has some X factors that I don't like, right? I got to start off by saying if you're Curtis Blaydes and your management team, call him up right now. Fire the motherfuckers. Because why are we taking this fight? Like, I get it. We just lost the title, but get yourself in contention again, right? Why not find yourself in a Gelatin Almeida fight, right? Why not put yourself in a position to bounce back in a better way? This is just a lose-lose matchup, right? If this ends up being a tough fight, everyone's going to look at you like, damn, what the hell happened? So tough position to be in, right? He kind of has to go out there and style on him. And honestly, I look at these odds and I don't like them, right? This is heavyweight MMA. And ultimately, I think the big X factor is what state is the UFC drug testing program in? God damn it. Because we have seen a win for Rizvan get overturned in the PFL due to testing for all of the anabolic steroids. Like, motherfucker got popped for like 4 different things. Like, so that was 2 years ago at this point. But how does he look under the UFC testing, right? Is he out there looking like a goddamn behemoth? Is he looking like Uberim? I won't be surprised if he does, which makes this fight a difficult fight to pick. I wanted to pick Kuniev here, if I'm being honest. I just feel like you said, the intercepting shots and honestly, that Dagestani base, right, serves him well. But ultimately, I think I'm going to also go with Curtis Blaydes here. I think the veteran savvy and the takedowns is going to be the big difference in this fight. I think if he could get Rizvan on his back and not in 50-50 grappling exchanges, I think he's going to have a huge advantage. But the more he's sort of playing in clinch positions, it actually opens things up for Kuniev. So I think this fight is more of a pick'em than the odds suggest, but give me Curtis Blaydes just the same. Now we finally move on to the main card. The main card that Sean was so upset about that he went on a rant for like 15 minutes last week. We've got Bobby King Green representing Sean's Dynasty team. Maybe that's why he was so mad, right? Plus 375 going up against the beloved fighting nerds, Mauricio Ruffy, minus 425 in the lightweight division. Sean, this fight is special, and I love that I get the chance to lead the dance because I'm going to keep it short. I think everyone is talking about how the odds are skewed on this one, and King Green has a much better chance. They're wrong, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is a very one-sided fight because of the way these two guys' styles match up. I think ultimately we've seen King Green get lit up from the outside against longer, rangier 55ers, and that's exactly what Mauricio Ruffy is here. I think the southpaw double attack is going to look nasty out there, and I think Mauricio Ruffy makes it look easy. Give me a first-round knockout for my guy.
Yeah, I'm going Ruffy here. I think this is kind of one of those UFC situations where they tried to push King Green out probably a good 3-4 years ago, and then he kept winning. So they were like, all right, let's give him that shot. He's a fan favorite. He's won 3 in a row. You know, here we go. He's done a little well, built a little bit of hype for himself. All right, put him on UFC 300. Okay, he's lost again. He got brutally knocked out by Turner. All right, it's not looking good. All right, let's get him out. And this is that fight to get him out. I think Ruffy has 4 or 5 inch reach advantage right from the start. I think King Green has a really tough time facing someone who he can never close, the range. And I think someone that I feel like King Green really lacks variation. I think he's just one where you kind of know what you're getting from King Green from the very beginning. And I think someone like Ruffy can use that to his advantage. Wow. And because he won, really good counterpuncher and really good with his footwork. And I think Green will try to close the distance as best as he can, but I think he's only going to fall right into Ruffy's range. And I think it's just going to be a really rough night. Just sort of kind of like the Jalen Turner fight. And I pray that it doesn't end the same way. But it's one of those where I think Green could use a little bit of his grappling skills and try to wrestle and neutralize Ruffy striking. I just don't see that necessarily happening here. I think this is one where, not like Michael Chandler, but in a way where ego kind of comes into play and you kind of want that big moment. You kind of want to show that you could still dance at the top, the top tier level. And I don't see Green forcing this to the ground, even though I think that is probably his best way to win. I see this one being more of a stand-up in a 15-minute fight that I don't think ends up happening. I think this fight will stand for 13 of those minutes, and I still don't think this fight even makes it past the second round. So I think Ruffy by second round knockout, unfortunately.
Second round is tough, but we'll take it. It's looking like a dynasty dub for me this week. If anything is an indicator, but these next 3 fights, God damn it, I better be an expert because all of these next 6 fighters are on my dynasty team. So that's going to be an interesting little wrinkle here too. I'm starting the night 3-3, God damn it. So gotta make sure my wins in our head-to-heads and individual matchups count, because if not, I could end up in a rough spot here. So we've got the number 5 ranked Amanda Lemos plus 120 going up against the number 7 ranked Yasmin Lucindo minus 135. Both ladies in separate trajectories at this point of their careers. Sean, it's only right you lead the dance on the division of queens. Take us away.
Yes, I think for these last 3 fights, I'm going to go first each time because you have them in Dynasty. You should be able to explain your analysis for each of your fighters on why you have both of them and why you think one of them is going to win. So my point of view doesn't really matter because it doesn't mean anything towards my dynasty in any way. This is more of these last 10, 15 minutes are all about you. So for me, I'm going to go first for each and every of the last 3 fights.
What a
For
gentleman.
me, yeah, I'm the best. For me, I think Lemos, obviously we know, very dangerous striker, very powerful punches. And my favorite part, I say this all the time, my favorite part about Lemos is the effective leg kicks. I think where she can use her leg kicks to just load up on her striking, puts her in a very powerful but very strong place in controlling the fight. I think she has had inconsistent performances when she has gone out there. I don't know if it's a mental thing. I don't know if she has an inability to neutralize the opponents from fighting their game. I feel like championship level fighters can find a way to force their fight to happen. And if it's not happening, try to neutralize the opponent from forcing their fight onto them and still fighting their fight. And I feel like that's what makes a champion. I've seen Lemos control fights throughout her career, and I've seen her lose fights because she has never been able to turn the page or turn fucking stride or any of it. You just almost feel like when Lemos isn't fighting her fight, it's never going to change in the next 15 minutes. And it's one where I feel it's going to go either way. So for me, honestly, I'm picking Lucindo to win this fight because I feel that Lemos will try to force her striking early. But I feel that Lucindo's strategy is going to bring weathering Lemos's early power and leg kicks early and trying to force not the gas tank out of her, but force all that heavy punches and all that, all the stuff you tell yourself before you walk into the fight. I'm going to control these first 3 minutes and force it out. Forcing Lemos to be vulnerable and try to look for, okay, how do I rebound? What do I do next? And I think Lemos struggles with that. And I think she has a real disadvantage in trying to find that, and she's so susceptible to either getting hit or especially getting taken down. And I think that's where Lucindo's just going to force it to the ground for at least 10 minutes of this fight and really try to force, the ground to pound and just constant mat fucking play. And I think this one is honestly going to be an easy 29-28 victory for Lucindo, where it's almost like she controls the majority of this fight handedly.
I love your breakdown of this fight because it's missing the one key piece that I think I'm allowed to fill the gaps in, and that is this should be an old school WWF hair match, right? The winner gets to keep the butch lesbian cut, right? The other one needs to go bald because they're coming into this fight with the identical hairstyle. God damn it! All jokes aside, though, this is a fun matchup for all the reasons you said. I think I'm also going to be tipping my hand, though. I'm going with Yasmin Lucindo as well. I think the lack of wrestling instincts for Amanda Lemos is what just kills it for me. Like, I think on the feet, I could see her building momentum and finding her way to victory, even with a point style decision. But I think ultimately, Yasmin Lucindo has shown to be dogged in her grappling pursuit, even if it's not necessarily like she doesn't have to force a takedown to find herself in top position. I think she can work her pressure on the outside, even if she's maybe getting caught at the end of some strikes, to eventually find her way to push it to the fence and find a good shot attempt, right? From there, I think it should be easy to take Amanda Lemos down. Now, obviously, you got to deal with a lot coming in, but I think, as you mentioned, it should be a relatively one-sided fight if Yasmin is able to take her down. But the same goes for Amanda Lemos in the inverse, right? If she can't get the takedown, this is going to be a very advantageous fight for Lemos. I just think the complete game is what wins fights here. And I think especially as you continue to age, right, it's hard to summon up that lightning to match the thunder, like we spoke about earlier, right? To find that one moment to take somebody out of the fight. I think it's going to be harder to do that against a younger, more athletic fighter, even though I think her striking is clearly levels above. Give me Yasmin Lucindo as well. So we're agreeing on a lot here down the stretch, God damn it. I love this fight, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it, Sean.
I'm assuming you're talking about the next fight in Jalen Turner.
Yeah. Why don't you take a hand at announcing it, right? Let's see how
All right,
that sounds.
Turner versus Bahamondes. You know, this is
Look at that.
key fight here for Jalen Turner. I think for me to go first, of course, you know, I think this is one where Turner gets overlooked now because of I've said this so many times on the show, where it's like it's the second you start losing a couple or even a streak, you're overlooked immediately. There was a time where Turner, especially going into that Dan Hooker fight, was Turner's going to kill Hooker. There's no way Hooker survives. You know, Turner, yes, I know he just lost, but he's going to come back. I think he lost to Gamron, if I remember correctly, but he's going to go in there and he's going to beat the brakes off of Hooker. But I feel like with Turner, it's you get the best of Turner and then you don't. You get one of the best fighters at this division, super lengthy. I I don't know whether this is a positive or a negative thing to say, but he reminds me so much of the Bronze Bomber in boxing that it's lengthy, weird sort of striking, but it works because if he lands like clean and connect, you're out cold. And I think Turner has such strong fucking arms and so lengthy. He knows how to completely control the octagon. And he does it so well at applying pressure with his hands. And then he starts overthinking, or he thinks that he's already like on top, like I'm the champion. I got it. This fight's mine. And then he is his own problem. The Dan Hooker fight, when he kicked Hooker in the face and Hooker ate that shit, still don't know how, you were like, all right, this fight's crazy, but this still is Turner's fight. But then he like let off the gas pedal, like he was so surprised that Hooker was still coming forward, and then Turner gassed out. And then you kind of just saw him like surprised and just accept fate that his fight was over. He lost. When 5 minutes before that, Turner was about to beat him into a ground and pound finish. And then, yes, you obliterated King Green, which that ref still to this day, I don't know. But then we get to, fucking, what was it, UFC 300 with Renato Moicano, and you're like, there he is again. Fucking phenomenal. Puts Moicano almost basically in a bag. He's got him in a body bag. He's done for. It's over. And then again, you get in your own head like, yeah, I already got it. Win's mine. This is easy. This is my fight. And then all of a sudden, it's like all of the fucking momentum you had just fucking washed away. And I feel like we've been seeing that. We saw that in the Gamrot fight. We saw it in the Hooker fight. And we absolutely saw it in the Moicano fight, where it's like all those are wins. He has the wins in the bag. And then he gets in his own way to now lose 3 out of 4. And that was a fight where even in the Hooker fight, Turner came in overweight, from what I remember correctly. And he still fucking couldn't finish the fight. It's like he goes all out and he just expects these dominant victories for these fans to really like, it's almost like he wants them to scream his name, like as he's a fucking king and cheer for me. I'm the one. And it's just something happens where it's just reality hits and all of a sudden you're on the way of getting your ass beat. You're on the bottom half of the ground and pound, and you're wondering what the fuck just happened. So this is a fight where I know I didn't talk about Bahamondes at all because this is a fight where I think Turner has to, and I mean has to, dominate with the excellent striking, fast kicks like he's got, and the heavy hands with the fucking fast combinations he's got. I think Bahamondes is super vulnerable to the uppercuts and with unorthodox sort of striking. I think one where Turner can really take advantage of those past fights and using his striking as an advantage because they've all worked, and just constantly push the pressure on Bahamondes, get him to get his back on the cage, and just tee off until the ref has to stop it. Because this has to be for Turner. I think this is one where the coaches, I don't give a fuck who it is, has to yell in his fucking face. If you lose this fight, you will never be a champion. You will never see the belt. You will never ever see a main event in your name ever. If you win, we put ourselves right back on the map as a top 7, and 1 win away from being a top 3, and being 2 wins away from facing Islam or whoever. But you need to prove it tonight. And let's not gloat. I don't care. You punch him until he's dead. If he dies, he dies. And you keep going until the ref stops it or the fucking whatever it takes for that fight to end. Finish the fight. That's it. That's it.
I'm loving the passion out of you because you not only are you so enthused that you're screaming about this Jalen Turner fight, but you didn't even talk about Ignacio, not once, right? Shout out to Nacho. I'm gonna keep this short and sweet though. I think I love this fight for both of these guys for very different reasons. I think every fight that Ignacio Bahamondes has lost in the UFC has been against potent strikers. Um, and we know him as a striker, right? So it's hard to register that in our brains. But in this matchup with both really long, rangy guys, it's going to be a dogfight, right? Everything needs to be earned in this matchup, right? Nothing's going to be taken for free. This is going to be a very fun positional chess match to see who ends up coming out on top. I think ultimately, though, I'm going to be picking it with potential here. I think based on the tape and everything we've seen, I would argue that Jalen Turner should be the favorite in this matchup. I think given the matchup and then given how well Jalen Turner was able to perform against Gamrot in a loss, but a fight that everyone felt like, man, this guy is right there, right? You tend to feel like, man, this guy should be unstoppable right now. Like just based on the way he fights, right? Dropping Moicano the way he did before the walk-off, before everything fell apart. He shows all the makings of a top fighter. And ever since he debuted at welterweight, man, I knew he was going to be special, right? But we hate to see him in a scenario where he's just barely not getting over the hump over and over again. In this matchup, though, I think just based on, like I said, if past this prologue, you kind of gotta lean with Jalen Turner. But I think Ignacio works with a very smart team with those guys out in Chicago, working with Bilal Muhammad. I think he is going to come into this fight with a good game plan to put him in the best position. And I think that really comes from pressure, right? Let's force Jalen Turner up against the fence and limit his defensive availabilities, right? I think Ignacio Bahamondes is really susceptible to straight strikes, so you got to be careful on that outside range. So why not crowd him? Why not put him in a spot where it's more uncomfortable for the spider to get out of the way? I think this is a dogfight, though, no matter how you shape it. There's going to be brain cells shed in the octagon, no matter what, for the next 3 fights. But this fight in particular, I'm going to pick Ignacio Bahamondes just because I think his potential for growth at this stage of his career is a little bit higher than Jalen Turner's, but my head is telling me to pick Jalen Turner here. But I'm going to go with the potential. Give me Nacho Bahamondes. We move on to the 155-pound division, our co-main event, the much maligned co-main event. So you better be bummed out the whole time you talk about this with the way you spoke about the fight last week. We got the number 3 ranked Justin Gaethje plus 138 going up against the number 11 ranked Rafael Fiziev, the favorite, minus 159, despite losing the first matchup. Justin Gaethje just edged out a decision. We talked a little bit about that one, but Sean, you get the luxury of leading the dance.
I think it's funny. I think it's really funny how Vegas works. I think it's funny how people forget, just like I just mentioned with Turner. You know, obviously Gaethje's last loss is devastating. He got knocked clean out in one of the most devastating knockouts in UFC history, and you have no idea how a fighter bounces back from it. So I think if it was anybody else, I would probably pick Fiziev or anybody, whoever was fighting, to win. But for me, I still think Gaethje has it. He was a number one contender. He was on his way to fighting Islam. He would have fought Islam by now. And, he risked it all for UFC 300 versus Max. And we thank him for that. And it was a hell of a fight. And, Max came with a game plan, won majority of the fight, and ended it in one of the best ways possible. To me, I still feel the way I feel. Obviously, I feel a little differently when it comes to how angry I felt. I still think they believe Gaethje is a number one contender because he was one, but I just don't know whether Gaethje can return to the former fighter that he was. Can you really see in a scenario of Gaethje winning the belt is what I was trying to tackle last week. And I guess in a way, yes, if he has a dominant victory here, you start thinking about him versus Khabib at that time. Like, oh, if Gaethje does this with the leg kicks, he might get Khabib here. And I feel like you're kind of right back in that scenario, except whatever it is, 4 or 5 years later. So it's weird. If Fiziev wins, it's a fucking awesome thing for him because from short notice to fight the guy that you had a slugfest with the first fight and now come out on top, it almost puts you right there in that top three, probably an Arman fight away, or I don't know what Arman's next fight's going to be, but Arman fight away from fighting for a belt himself and bringing a new name to Islam. So it's like it's tough. It really is because I'm picking Gaethje to win because I think he still has it. I still think he has what it takes to win this fight, but it sucks for me because I still think that even with Gaethje's relentless pressure and the leg kicks, I don't know who Gaethje's going to be coming out of that knockout. How different is he going to look? And I think if Fiziev was coming in on full camp, I would have picked Fiziev here because of a guy wanting revenge and trying to really right that loss would have been huge. But there was a reason UFC didn't give him this fight. They focused on giving him Dan Hooker. They focused on trying to get two guys to kill each other, but also I think they also felt that Gaethje could win against Dan Hooker right now. But two guys who will kill each other, like when Hooker fought Poirier. Those two dudes went to the hospital, didn't even remember each other's names. So I think you were facing a sort of fight like that. I don't know. This is a close fight. Based on the history of both of these guys, I think Gaethje still has it, but honestly, this is as blind as you're going to get because you don't know which Gaethje you get. Devastating knockouts like that can really change you. And even if they look the same as a fighter, you don't know how they're going to react when they see an overhand right or, anything that could have potentially knocked him out in the last fight, how they might jump earlier now because they fear of that punch coming back. There's a lot. It's a lot. It sucks. And I look at this also kind of in that camp. And it's the one part which I wanted to pick Fiziev is I feel like with Usman and with Rose Namajunas, they really struggled after a really tough loss. And even with Usman losing the belt in another devastating knockout, he came back and looked pretty good, but not good enough to beat Edwards in a fight where I thought he was still always better than Edwards. I think just that knockout made him timid. He was very much different fighter in that rematch, and I feel like we're getting that sort of part two now with the same camp, and now you just kind of hope that Gaethje can bring himself out of it. And Gaethje, the reason I feel a little different, and I know I'm talking a lot, is because I saw Gaethje on a podcast, and he talks about how he really gave up everything for this. He doesn't have a family. He lives alone. He puts 100% into being a champion. And he came into the UFC trying to really push for that knockout and trying to be that sort of star, really trying to make that bonus money. And then it took him to like the second fight, or even I think he said the Michael Johnson fight, to realize that he can win titles and win the belt here. And then that's what he started pushing towards. So I think a guy who really honestly has tried everything he can to be a champion still wants to be that at whatever he is, 33 years old, 34, I don't know how old he is. But I still think he's got a little something left in the tank. Do I think he could be a champion? No. But I think he's still got enough to beat a short notice Fiziev, who is a great fighter, but also coming off of a devastating injury himself not too long ago. I think one where Gaethje should have enough on a full camp to be the guy he's facing. He's faced before on whatever 2 weeks notice. So it'll be a good fight. It really will. And I really hope Gaethje doesn't, both of these guys don't get obliterated. But I still think Gaethje's got just enough.
Yeah, man, this is a great fight. And if you ask me, that was great analysis, right? Analysis worthy of a co-main event slot, if you ask me. But there's a lot of things I could repeat that you just went off on, so I'll try to keep it as a minimum. I think
Not a co-main.
This fight definitely favors Fiziev early. I think I agree. If this was a full camp, I would be confidently picking Fiziev here. I just think coupled with the way he lost the first one, right? Getting overwhelmed down the stretch. And then this being a short notice fight really swings it towards Justin Gaethje, if you ask me. I think no matter what, with the way these guys fight, this is going to be a tooth and nail brawl. And I don't think, funny enough, that Fiziev is going to be in a bad spot despite coming off of a bad injury against Gamrot. I think he's well trained for this fight despite not having a fight on the books. I just think ultimately the way these guys match up is going to be surviving the buzzsaw of Fiziev early, right? And then putting on that onslaught to come back. I think this fight is going to be won through blood and guts and determination, right? It's going to be a lot of strong outside kicks from Fiziev that are going to be clearly taking a toll on Gaethje. And like you said, at this stage, can he stand up to these strikes? Can he stand up to this onslaught? Only time will tell, but I think ultimately I'm going to also go with Justin Gaethje. I feel like this is a hard pick for both of us because, yeah, we thought he was 34. The man is 36 years old and coming off of the most devastating knockout of his career. So it's a tough spot to be in, no doubt, and kind of crazy that we're both picking him here. But I just think ultimately styles make fights. And I think this in a 3-round fight is going to favor Gaethje 10 times out of 10. But I will not be surprised if Fiziev wins here. I think at this stage of their careers, Fiziev is clearly the fighter that has more to give the fight game, right? I won't be surprised if Justin Gaethje loses this and rides off in the sunset. I hope he doesn't. I hope we get to see another title shots in his future, but that's what's on the line in this fight, right? That's what makes this a co-main event because careers go in different directions depending on how this one plays out. But give me Justin Gaethje one last ride, goddamn it. Let's see that Islam fight because we need another what if scenario after his fight with Khabib. But I doubt that one will be as close. We move on to the main event. There's a lot of people trying to shit on this fight. God damn it. I think this is one of the best fights the UFC can make this year. How about that? We got the champ, Poatan Shama, -110, going up against Magomed Ankalaev, -110. Basically a pick 'em, ladies and gentlemen. You can find him as a favorite or underdog, depending on which book you look at. This one for the light heavyweight title. Sean, you get to lead the dance. But why don't we remind the people? This is another head-to-head dynasty matchup where I've got Alex Pereira. Sean's got Magomed Ankalaev. Let's let our biases be known so that we can throw out our predictions. Go ahead, Sean. Lead the dance.
I think this fight, people hate this fight, and it's so funny because it's like this is the fight everyone's been asking for so long, and everyone always wants to fight, or fight who like a king is in a certain division or anything. Anyone that's good in anything, people have to hate and find something to hate and to knock it down. Right, so this was the big fight everyone was waiting for, right? The Ankalaev fight. Oh, he can't fight wrestlers. He can't wrestle. He's going to get exposed by the wrestling. Then you finally get it, and people go, "Nah, Ankalaev ain't really all that. This fight's trash." It's like, dude, it's just this world now where everyone has to find a reason to hate, and no one can have their own opinions. So everyone has to hate, and then people jump on the hate because it's the easiest thing to do. And then if people come after you for hating, you just point the finger at the guy you heard it from first. So it's just like, I love this fight. I really do. This is a fight between two completely polar opposite type fighters. And honestly, I think Pereira wins via knockout, third round. I think, to me, this is one where I think you could see wrestling versus leg kicks. I think that's the entirety of this fight. When I think of Magomed, I think Magomed's incredible. But I don't think Magomed has really faced, I would say, the top tier of competition yet. He hasn't faced Yuri or Jamal, who just fought basically what would have been a number one contender fight if Pereira hadn't obliterated them 4 times already. So it's like Pereira, Hill, Yuri, and then Ankalaev just right below it. It's like, just how I see it. And I think Ankalaev has held the number one ranking just because he hasn't seen Pereira yet. And I think the UFC did that on purpose. They wanted to really hype up Pereira and who he is, beating up these guys who are also strikers and beating him up the way he has. It has been perfect. The way the UFC has drawn it up in their head to the way it's actually happened, it's perfect. Pereira is this, knockout artist with no bad anything. The fans love him. There's nothing behind the scenes going on. There's no stupid shit. He comes in, he says Shama 52 times, knocks him out, and then calls out Adesanya for some reason for the 58th time, and moves it forward with the beautiful, colorful shorts and to do it again. Same left hook you wait for every time, and it's just like, it really is. It's like a Cinderella underdog story of a guy who, you heard Adesanya talk about. He brings his way all the way up, gets his revenge tour, moves up, and becomes a champion in 2 different weight classes, and it's great. Ankalaev really hasn't impressed me. That Jan Blachowicz fight was the fight I was really waiting for. That title fight where I really thought, Ankalaev could have really dominated Jan and became a champion, a really tough champion, because I think he would have really woke up that day. But you lose those first 2 rounds, and then you do bounce back. But it was just one of those where Jan kind of died after 10 minutes. He could barely stand up, and there was a point where I thought Magomed was dead, and then he woke up. But then there was also a point in the 4th round where I was watching that fight, and I'm like, how are you not finishing Blachowicz right now? He's barely standing. Like, he is on the verge of collapsing push him with one finger. He's going down, but forcing it to the ground, forcing him to get air. It just was a shitty fight that I was so glad that the next week they made the Jamal Hill versus Glover fight, because it was such a bad fight that it didn't work out. Then you got the Johnny Walker fight, which, obviously that no contest and all that was kind of whack and whatever. But then forcing that fight, whatever it was, 3-4 months later, then really obliterating Johnny Walker, which was expected. But then I gave him another shot in the Rakic fight. And to be honest with you, I wasn't impressed with the Rakic fight. I really thought Ankalaev could have really taken over in that Rakic fight. And I think that was the fight Rakic had just coming back from injury, if I remember correctly. And so I really thought, as much as I love Rakic and he's right there as well, I thought Ankalaev could have easily taken him to the ground and forced a first-round submission. And he didn't get that. And that's what bothers me about Ankalaev is just, yes, he's gonna take Pereira down. It's gonna happen. And when he does, he's gonna force it for 5 full minutes of holding him to the ground. And it's gonna happen. I know Ankalaev says he's not gonna wrestle and whatever. He's gonna do it. He's gonna wrestle. Fuck whoever, whatever everybody says. They're just saying that because they don't want Pereira to lose, so they're trying to force him into standing up. Fuck that. I'm taking you to the ground and I'm suffocating you for 25 full minutes if I have to. But it's just one of those where I think Pereira and his leg kicks are just going to be so devastating. Ankalaev has shown how susceptible he is to leg kicks. and he has had a really tough time defending him and eating them up because when he gets hit, he can no longer walk after those 6-7 minutes of trying to walk on a couple leg kicks, and we know Pereira's leg kicks are fucking devastating. So I think that's where, like I said, to start this whole rant, leg kicks versus wrestling. If Pereira has mastered the takedown sprawl defense versus him beating up the leg, I think that's going to leave Ankalaev really slow standing up, forcing these ugly, sort of sloppy takedowns, and eventually just getting the ground and pound finish. Honestly, I think this one could end in round 2, but I'm giving Ankalaev the benefit of the doubt, and I still think he loses ground and pound finish round 3, and Pereira wins again.
Damn, ground and pound. I was not expecting that. This is an awesome fight, awesome matchup, and I love that you picked my guy, right? Because it frees me up analysis rise. Because I got to give Magomed Ankalaev a lot of credit, right? I think he is technically a very skilled fighter, and although he has advantages that are very easy for us to see, I feel like sometimes he's out there battling himself, right? He's out there worried and anxious about what's coming back instead of being able to execute in a pristine way on his shots. I like this fight for Alex Pereira because of that. I think this fight is going to take place on that outside edge for a very long time. And I think ultimately, when they're in those moments, right, it's going to be easy for Alex Pereira to land shots, particularly, like you said, land leg kicks. But a dynamic that's very interesting in this fight, I think Magomed Ankalaev could straight knock out Alex Pereira, right? Mixing in those level chains feints and throwing straight shots down the middle has proven to be very effective against Chama. And I think in this matchup, it's really going to be about whose chin holds up the best. I think ultimately, though, as these guys continue to clash, I agree. I think at some point, Magomed is going to be able to take down Alex Pereira. I think Alex Pereira has shown whenever he gets taken down, it's just a matter of surviving, right? Getting to that next round. I think it'll be wise for Ankalaev in those spots to really sell out on his ground and pound, right? How about this for a hot take? I think if either of these guys are more live to get a submission victory, I think it's Alex Pereira. I don't think it's going to be Magomed Ankalaev because I think Ankalaev would be wise to take advantage of those positions to try to land damage. I think although Poatan has looked unbeatable since moving up to 205, I think we've seen him get clipped in a lot of his fights and show a specific vulnerability to those level change threats, right? So if I'm Magomed, feint that level change early and often, make him think about it, and then try to land your shot straight down the middle. But this is a tough one, man. This is a hard matchup. I think Alex Pereira comes out on top, though, in a grueling fight. I'm going to give it a 4th round knockout. But I won't be surprised by any iteration of this fight. I won't be surprised if this is a close fight that goes a long way. I won't be surprised if this is an easy one-sided fight. I think there's a lot of ways this could play out. But in this Game of Thrones, there could only be one champ. And I think ultimately Alex Pereira is really going to set himself apart from one of the worst divisions in the current landscape of the UFC.
Yes, and that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. Didn't mean to interrupt you. This is a 2-parter, a kind of very similar question. Let's just say Pereira wins, right? Let's go off of that. My question to you is, going into this fight, who do you think the UFC wants to win? And 2, if Pereira wins, what the hell is next?
I think they definitely want Pereira to win this fight. I won't be surprised if his next fight is outside of the UFC against someone like Usyk with that joint venture that just got announced with Turki Al-Sheikh. Holy shit. We live in crazy times, ladies and gentlemen, in this combat sports enterprise. But I think the most logistical next step, especially if they cannot get the John Jones, Tom Aspinall fight done. Why not? Who says no? Right? Let's make this happen. Give me Pereira moving up again. I think the craziest part about this matchup that we didn't even talk about, Pereira's the guy that moved up. But Pereira made Ankalaev look like look tiny, right? He doesn't look tiny in any of his face-offs. He looks like the clearly bigger guy, and even at heavyweight, he will have those advantages. Um, I think that what makes it weird though, we already made our picks, so we can move on. But what makes this fight weird too is I feel like I don't know what's keeping Ankalaev from meeting his potential. This could be that moment, right? This could very well be that moment. But it just feels like he's constantly let himself short in a lot of these fights, like you said, and it's sort of let him down, right? I think a lot of that, funny enough, is some of the PTSD from that fight against one of your dynasty standouts, Paul Craig. I think losing that fight in the last seconds made him feel like, oh shit, like I need to be careful about when I decide to engage. But that also leaves him in tough positions in a lot of these fights too, because it's like he's allowing things to play out in front of him that put him in bad spots when the reality of the skill set suggests that he should be winning and running away with it. So I don't know, man. Either of these guys could come out looking like Super Saiyans, but I think we get a great fight, and I think Alex Pereira ends up on top and ends up having the world at his feet, right? I think that's why the UFC would want him to win. It's because he's probably one of the biggest stars they got today, and there's a lot of different options for him at this point. Funny enough, the most non-sexy option is fighting someone in his weight class, which is a good problem to have as a champion, right? You win this fight, it kind of feels like you're getting strapped to a rocket ship no matter what.
Yeah, I think to answer my own question, I think the UFC doesn't mind if Ankalaev wins this one because it kind of delays the timeline of the light heavyweight division because obviously this fight would be automatically an immediate rematch if Ankalaev were to win. And I do think the UFC does want to make the Pereira Jones fight because they know they'll make a lot of money off that, and they know that that will be Jones's last fight. And I think Jones has probably put it into his contract agreement with this Aspinall fight. His leverage as I'll do this. You'll pay me this much, but I better get this fucking Pereira fight because then like he can end the year. I don't know when he's fighting. I know they said this summer, but I do expect that by end of 2025, latest early 2026, which I don't even think it makes it that long, that fight will happen. And I do think Pereira is an active fighter. So I think even after this, Pereira will fight one more time before the John Jones rumors start circling after, Jones wins or loses. Um, and in that's kind of what I wanted to answer is there's really no one for him to face except for like a Rakic or Carlos Ulberg, which I don't know if they're going to want to do that to him right now. But I just think like that's the toughest part for what's next in the division. So I think they're going to give him one more title defense of that nature, another name like that to add to the resume and expect him to win, and then force that Jones fight where you got a potential double champ status fight versus the greatest of all time, and the fight where everyone could say like, "Look at this, it's legacy," sort of situation, and probably almost the end of both of their careers because Pereira after this time next year, we may be looking at the curtains of Pereira's career. So this might be Pereira's older than Jones, so it's definitely heading towards the end for both of these guys, unfortunately.
That's a great show. I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Pereira wins this fight. If we get the John Jones fight before the Tom Aspinall fight even gets thought of
Oh,
being
I
made,
hope
I
not.
think I think John Jones is ducking Tom big time.
I don't think that, but
I
I
think
think
that.
I think he wants the money first.
The
But
money. Here we
I
go. The
think I
money.
think the UFC. Well, yes, for sure. I think the UFC knows that John is gonna probably be like, "Yo, just give me the money. Give me the Pereira fight first. I promise you, I fight Tom next." They're like, chill. You're not fighting Tom last. You'll just duck. You'll just fucking retire, and you'll do that. So I think I think they've come to an agreement that all right, I'll fight Tom, but I better get Pereira. You get what you want, I get what I want, and I still make probably fucking 30 million in both fights.
But there's no way they
And
can negotiate like that because You could very much lose the Tom fight. Pereira could very much lose this fight, and now all those
Exactly.
negotiations are null and void. So I don't.
Yes, but I still think they make that fight because Pereira's a fan. Even if they both lose, right? I still think they'll make this fight because I think Pereira is going to head towards the end of his career anyway, and they can make that a fun, main event somewhere. They'll probably fucking throw in a BMF. I know they won't do that, but they'll make it something stupid where those two fight each other, and Pereira tries to get a crack at a third division. So they'll make that fight. There's no doubt, and I think they'll make sure that Pereira after this fight gets. If he wins against Ankalaev, he'll get someone like an Oldberg or a Rocket, somewhere where they absolutely believe he could win, and add to it so that the money is there for when they make this crazy pay-per-view probably in Vegas. And Jones, if he beats Aspinall, and you have one of the greatest fucking fights of all time, the one they couldn't make with Ngannou, so they try to, force it with this Aspinall and Pereira, and they'll say that these two fights are better than what Ngannou would have ever brought, and somehow Ngannou's name will be brought in.
Dragged through the mud as always. I love fantasizing about all these things because the only thing that's left is for us to find out what actually happens. But before we get there, ladies and gentlemen, we get the honor of having another Dynasty MMA draft. We got 4 picks, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a very rare one here because we have 4 picks, but there are only 8 fighters available, right? So it makes it very interesting. It's a very interesting 4-pick dynasty. And Sean gets the first pick. So why don't you make your decision, brother? Who do you got with your first overall?
That's tough. There's 2 guys I want, but I'm gonna need a win in a tough dynasty. So give me Carlos.
Wow, look at that, Carlos Leal.
I need a win. I'm gonna need a win in this dynasty. I mean, this week it's gonna be a little rough for me.
I'm not gonna lie, that might have been the happiest moment I've had in the history of Dynasty
I wanted
MMA
Santos.
on this show. Yeah, Mairon Santos is too good to pass up on here. Now, there's a lot of different ways I can go, right? I almost wanted to pick Armen Petrosyan just to spite you, right? Just to have another one of your guys you dropped on my team. But I'm not going to go that way. I also felt like throwing a flyer on Rizvan, right, to see how that one goes, but I can't really afford another tie. So you know what? Give me a Brazilian strong fighter that's going to put you on the back foot. Give me the Djorden Santos as well as Mairon Santos. Give me double the Santos. And now you get to pick again.
I only have like 3 fighters I could pick.
No, you have 5. But yes.
Yes, but let's be real here.
Yeah, you're not picking Alex Morono. That's right.
Yeah. And I'm not picking Ozzy either. Or Castaneda.
Hey, Castaneda's not the worst pick.
No, he's not. He's not. I don't like Petrosyan. I don't want a loss.
It's like I don't want any of these guys, if I'm being honest.
I don't want fucking any of them. Ugh. Just fuck me. Just give me Rizvan.
Now, another thing that makes this interesting is now with our dynasty picks, we have 2 more head-to-head matchups, right? So let me lay this out as best as possible as I'm here tweaking with the document, making sure that everything is listed up to board, up to standard. So we've got the following head-to-heads now that it is all laid out. We've got Curtis Blaydes and Rizvan Kuniev. We've got Joshua Van and Rei Tsuruya. We've got Mairon Santos and Francis Marshall, King Green and Mauricio Ruffy, and Magomed Ankalaev and Alex Pereira as our head-to-head matchups this week. That's a mouthful, goddammit. That's a whole main card. So it's going to be a huge week for Dynasty this week. But then we also get a couple of other interesting matchups along the way. So our Dynasty teams are as follows. Let's try to make this as digestible as possible. I have the following fighters: Alex Pereira, Justin Gaethje, Jalen Turner, Ignacio Bahamondes, Amanda Lemos, Yasmin Lucindo, Mauricio Ruffy, Curtis Blaydes, Josh Van, Rafael Fiziev, Chris Gutierrez, Mairon Santos, and Djorden Santos. Give me double the Santos at the end of the night. And then Sean has the following: Magomed Ankalaev, Bobby King Green, Brunno Ferreira, Francis Marshall, Rei Tsuruya, and Rizvan Kuniev. This is an exciting dynasty head-to-head because, goddamn, we could come on this show and either of us could have got exactly swept in the dynasty head-to-head, and it won't be the most surprising thing ever. So we got a lot to look forward to next week. Is there anything you want to get off your chest before we get out of here, Sean?
That this is a very tough week at Dynasty for me on the projections, but you know what? Anything can happen. But I think this is still a pretty decent card. I liked a lot of these fighters. I still don't like the co-main, but I do like the fighters on the co-main. I just don't like that that's a co-main event on a card I have to pay $8 for. But I think it's still a pretty good card, and I very much look forward to the outcomes of all these fights and what it entails for their futures, for sure.
I love that. Business as usual here with UFC 313. It was a blast, but make sure you're following the brand at all social media platforms, OTS Media Co., OTS Media on YouTube, so you never miss all of the awesome stuff we've got coming your way. But just like that, another week is in the books, ladies and gentlemen. We will only know who wins next week. But until then, we can always remember that if you're not out there with both your eyes raked, God damn it, you're a winner at the end of the day too. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.